Alright, so I've had an interesting pattern of experiences that I have noticed as far as my interactions go with people in my job because this is mostly a job experience that I am speaking from. It does happen out in the wild, but it's more frequently while I am in, I guess, business mode. So it's not while I am dressed in a way that makes me look a particular way. Of course, I still have my piercings and I have my hair that are kind of indicators as to, it's just some insight as to who I am. But when I'm wearing my work stuff, like I don't wear makeup and it's just like a t-shirt and I wear some sweatpants. That's all I do for my job. Sneakers. So it's very nondescript, very gender neutral as far as what you see is what you fucking get. So I do talk not incredibly often, but often enough about my experience of gender and my gender identity or lack thereof, because being agender to me, I feel, is more of a lack of a gendered experience than it is a neutral gender experience. And it's difficult to conceptualize a lack of gender, and it kind of is reflected as neutral, as far as like things that can be perceived. A person's identity isn't always necessarily reflected by their appearance, but for me, I am aware that, I mean, there are a few examples of things that are reflected as gender neutral rather than like just an absence, the void of gender. And so, my voice not being particularly masculine or particularly feminine, the way that I dress not being particularly masculine or particularly feminine, uh, the way that I present myself, like how I speak, my cadence, my timbre, all that kind of stuff isn't necessarily fem or masc. And instead of that translating to an absence of a gendered experience, it translates to a neutral gender experience. That's what I'm trying to get across. And so for me, being agender means that I lack a distinct connection to an internalized experience of gender. And that makes, well, a lot of the shit just not matter to me. As far as, being misgendered and being talked to in a certain way, it kind of just rolls off of me because I mostly just don't care. But I do take a special interest in how I am perceived. I find that understanding how other people perceive you does help to kind of navigate the world, because a person that is perceived as a man is going to be treated a good deal differently than a person who is perceived as a woman. It's easier to get from point A to point B when you know what pit stops you're going to take. And for me, people's perceptions of me are like pit stops. And if I don't know, if I have no idea of where I stand with others, it makes it more difficult for me to navigate interactions. And when we have, several places where we're having issues navigating one interaction to the next, it makes the whole thing, like whole timeline of the, experience of being a person a bit more difficult. And so I do find a great deal of value in how I am perceived. And I do like periodic check-ins to see what are people thinking about me as far as how I am perceived. And from the information that I have gathered so far, I am of the understanding that to most I am a feminine leaning individual as far as appearance and presentation goes. That when someone sees me, they think woman. And that is not something that I want, of course, but that is a reality that I have come to accept because, well, it's reality. However, I have noticed a pattern of misgendering that isn't congruent with the overall perception that I have gleaned from um, just interacting with people. And so in my job, I talk on the phone a lot and I meet with people like in person. And I've noticed that people, when they talk to me on the phone, um, like not a negligible amount of times, I have been misgendered as male. Someone has assumed that I was a man and called me sir. Um, and while I don't find any issue with that, I don't feel any type of way about it. It is information that is not lined up with what I understand to be reality. And so this is another check-in, I suppose, because there's a pattern that I have noticed that isn't in line. And so I have been thinking about it for the past few days as to what this could mean. And I have talked to a few people. I tried to talk to Dig about it, and he got fucking weird because he's fucking weird about it. And then I had one of my K-pop friends that I talked to. And then I'm also in a Facebook group for people transitioning and just, advice and support and all that kind of shit. And so I broached the topic with them as well. And it's interesting because the group for trans people that I'm in is helpful. It's got a lot of resources, it's got a lot of people, a lot of perspectives, a lot of information. I've found that it's not as useful as just talking to someone that I know. And I was hoping that that person could be Dig because he knows me rather well. But, it be that way sometimes. So while the trans group that I'm in is helpful, is a resource in this arena, it wasn't really so much. People were kind of doing surface shit as far as what I was trying to do was kind of understand why this was happening. And they were looking at it more like, well, don't be offended because, people do that sometimes. People are shitty. They could have been trying to insult you, but, you're a strong individual and all that shit. That's not what I'm trying to get out of people when I'm broaching this topic. Like, I don't give a shit what people think. And so that's not an issue for me. Like my self-esteem and all that shit, that's not tied up in what other people think of me. It was more me trying to understand what other people are saying because I am not other people, and so I don't understand what exactly it is that I am not seeing that they are. And that's what I wanted to know because, whether you like it or not, others do have kind of a stake in the progression of your life, and to ignore that is to ignore really the concept of humanity. I did find it interesting that my friend in the K-pop group just very succinctly summed up the experience in a way that was, it was perfect. And it was funny because, they did it in a better way than all these people that are very well versed with the trans community, words and terms and phrases and all that shit. They were just like, it just really more depends on how people feel when they interact with you. It's not so much the presentation, it's not so much the sound of your voice as it is how you present yourself, how you speak. And maybe I need to describe this a little bit better. Because, of course, my appearance goes into this. Of course, the way that my voice sounds goes into this, but it's the overall ambiance, the overall feeling, the vibe that a person gets from interacting with me. And before I go on to explain more things, I wanted to kind of highlight what I'm talking about as far as a pattern of misgendering me as male. Over the last 4 years that I've been doing this job, almost 5 years, I've been misgendered as male probably 10 times. And so that's a small amount, but it is kind of stark for a person that looks like me, to be in person called sir. It's a little bit odd, and it's something that I wanted to understand from the standpoint of just being a person rather than being a person with feelings and like, sensibilities that can be offended. That's not what I was looking at it like. I'm looking at it like, why are people saying this though? This past week, I had a woman call me sir repeatedly, and she was a little bit weirded out that I didn't correct her, that I didn't make a big deal out of it, which, I'm not going to because it doesn't really fucking matter to me. But also, it was just interesting because I was under the assumption that people don't do that. That's not like a thing that people don't mix up sir and ma'am. That's not a thing that people do. And so I went to this trans Facebook group asking like, is this something you guys kind of encounter? And why do you think it is? Is it like a thing for like people in the military? Do military people call like all people of higher station sir? Is that a thing? Because I feel like that is, but not like ubiquitous throughout the military. Um, is it a thing that like maybe I just don't know because I don't use sir and ma'am? That you can mix those two up. I don't know that to be true, but maybe it is. Is it a thing like a Freudian slip where they're looking at me and interacting with me and thinking they're interacting with a man, and they're like, don't say man, don't say man, don't say sir, don't say sir, and they just say sir because that's what they're thinking. Is it an instance where I'm being insulted? Are they trying to make me feel bad about myself? And I assume it's not, because I'm in a position where I go out to do inspections and I'm allotting money for these people. And so it would bode well for them to treat me nicely. Not to say that, like, I'm in a position where I can coerce these people, but it would turn out better for them if they treated me with respect rather than not doing so. And so I assume that they wouldn't do that, but it's also possible that they would. I mean, I could be a person that offends their sensibilities so much so that they don't give a shit about the money that they're going to get. They just want to make me feel bad. And I don't understand that, but maybe that's something that someone might do. In talking to my K-pop friend, we kind of boiled it down to, it's more of a nebulous experience as far as interacting with me, that I don't code particularly feminine, and because of this kind of intersection of, well, binaryism, like that there's only the two genders, and kind of this, I don't want to say white supremacist, but like this white centric idea of what makes a woman a woman. I don't necessarily fit into that because I'm not white and I don't have white features. And so some of my features that would translate to feminine for another black person might not for a white person. That some of my features might translate to masculine for a white person. And typically, the people that do misgender me have been white. And so that might be something that's playing into it. I think overall, my appearance does play into it. Like, if I had to allot value for each thing, as far as what plays into Finn being misgendered, I would say that we would give maybe 2 points to appearance. Then we would give like maybe 4 points to the the way that my voice sounds, like my pitch and my timbre and like my cadence, because I don't do a whole lot of girl cadence when I'm talking in like business mode. And then uh, I think for my overall vibe, it's almost like this like it factor that like it can't be actually distilled to one individual trait. Um, but I think the overall vibe that I give people is what has the most value. I would give that 6 points, to be honest. So we have 2 for my appearance, 4 for the way that my voice sounds, and then 6 for the overall vibe. And so I think there's a lot more value in the way that someone feels while talking to me. And I think it's a combination of how I sound, of course, a little bit of my appearance, because mostly my appearance is very feminine, um, but also my assertiveness, my confidence, and those are things that can't be like physically measured. But I do think they play a huge role in how people feel when they talk to me. So when I talk to people, I am typically rather assertive. I am rather knowledgeable and I don't stumble all that much. And those are traits that are commonly ascribed to a masculine experience with a person while interacting with a person. And so I think people kind of, interact with me and feel that I am not expressly feminine in how I am carrying myself and how I am responding to these people. But because of this concept of binaryism, because of this concept that you can only be one or the other, they have nowhere to put me as far as like placing someone into this box. And so feminine is off the fucking table, and the only thing they have, the only other viable option would be masculine. And so that's what their mind kind of subconsciously latches onto, and they use those terms. They use sir, rather than using ma'am or just using my name. And I do find that really interesting. Um, I think as we go forward, we're going to find that a lot of people kind of more fit into this concept of neutral gender expression, neutral gender experiences. And, the me being agender or being non binary is not going to be such a big fucking deal because a lot of people kind of have the exact same feeling. It's never been something that has bothered me. Um, it does become kind of an issue of feeling respected if you tell someone these are the pronouns that I use and they continue not to use them. It's not so much I'm offended by you misgendering me because you perceive me some certain way. It's that you don't have the wherewithal, the awareness, or that you don't care enough not to ignore that part of yourself and to be respectful of what I have told you. So it's almost like telling someone what your name is and they continue calling you by a different fucking name that isn't your name. And it's annoying. It's mostly just annoying, and it makes me not want to deal with you, because I'm a person that is very extremely adverse to confrontation, and so I don't want to have this conversation every time I talk to you. I'm just too fucking lazy to tell you, to teach you, to guide you. I'm not your fucking teacher and you're not paying me tuition, so why is it my responsibility to tell you how to address me repeatedly when I have already done it once, already done it twice, already done it 3 times, 3 strikes, you're fucking out. And so that's kind of how I treat that as far as um, continued misgendering, because it just feels like interpersonally lazy to not respect someone's pronouns. It's kind of socially unaware, socially oblivious, and just overall, I just don't think very highly of you, to be honest. And if that makes me sound like a person that is being too rigid, I don't care, because fortunately for me, I get to choose what standards I put the people that I choose to interact with to. I get to decide what things annoy me, what things I find valuable, and you also have the choice to decide to use my pronouns or not. And I'm just saying that I also have the choice to drop your ass like a hot fucking brick if you continue not to use my pronouns. That's all I'm fucking saying. Wow, that was kind of a tangent. But I do just find the overall experience of gender and how people have evolved to understand it, and how the concept itself is evolving with time. And I just think it's really interesting, because those people that are misgendering me as male, while they are doing something that would commonly be seen as like a faux pas, it would commonly be seen as something, really bad to do, it kind of is reflective of this heightened sense of perception of a person, that they look at me and they speak to me and they interact with me, and they don't hear, they don't entirely see feminine. And that's because I'm not entirely feminine, but because it's not something that they're used to seeing. They're not used to seeing this wide variation in traits in one individual. Their mind kind of compartmentalizes it to male. And I think as we find ways to express non-male and female experiences as far as gender goes, that those people will be really valuable, that they are kind of a benchmark in understanding what makes a person masculine, what makes a person feminine, what makes a person androgynous. Because they're seemingly rather sensitive to variations in presentation and expression. And I find that really, really interesting, that they actually know something far and beyond what a lot of people understand, though they don't exactly understand why it is that they're doing this, why it is that they feel this way. And a lot of people I find interact with me and feel like they're not like other girls because I'm not one. And that's, I mean, it's cool to make, distinctions. It's cool to notice that there's differences. And I think noticing the difference is like the first step into accepting them and celebrating them, because I mean, it's cool. It's cool to be different. I mean, variety is the spice of fucking life. And so I think what we're seeing right now is kind of a turning point in understanding that there is a difference between sex and gender, that there are different ways that a person can express themselves that aren't distinctly feminine or masculine, and that those traits, those characteristics have words to describe them. And so understanding that there's differences, I feel like, is the first step, or it's a really good way to teach people, because it's easier to name things that you know to exist, rather than to give someone a name and then explain what exactly this thing is into existence. And so I think that the people that have this perception, that have this insight into expression that is a variant of what is conventional, those people actually have a good amount of knowledge, they have a good amount of insight that is very useful for them to understanding what it is to be a non-binary person. That's all I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's been a stressful week. It's been a long fucking road, and I haven't been super keen on doing videos, but I'm gonna try to get back into doing them. I definitely want to, for at least Alex, at least for you, Alex, I want to do some more poems. It's just I have to get my head in the right space to do them, but I'll definitely be doing them in the future. But yeah, let me know you guys' thoughts on just the experience of gender expression and how a person carries themselves, not necessarily their appearance or the like the physical traits, but the overall air that they give off, how that is kind of reflective of their gender expression. I am interested to know, like, what do you guys think as far as like me? Do you all think that like I am particularly feminine? Because I realize when you look at me, I am very feminine, but I find that a lot of people, when they interact with me online before they see my face, most people think I'm a dude. And those are things that just really, I find really interesting. That, reality is a little bit plastic. It's a little bit subject to, whoever is interpreting it, whoever is experiencing it. It's different from person to person. So, yeah, that's been my whole spiel, I guess. But until next time.